Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to Aussie Fish Keeping. So in today's video, we're going to be talking all about what overfeeding does to your aquarium. So we're going to be going over, how it affects your fish, how it affects your water quality, how it affects pretty much everything to do with your aquarium and why it's like really bad to overfeed your fish. Now, overfeeding is very easy to do. I've definitely done it to my fish so many times before, but it's really good if you can try and not overfeed your fish. It can lead to, a bunch of health problems, a bunch of problems and troubles with your aquarium. And we are going to be going over all the things that it does affect. So without any further ado, let's just jump straight into today's video. So as for the first reason you don't want to be overfeeding your fish, this one's a pretty obvious one, and that's just, all the health problems that you can run into if you do overfeed your fish. So overfeeding your fish is not healthy for them whatsoever. I mean, I think I've said this in a few other videos, but you can imagine, overfeeding anything isn't necessarily good for them. So overfeeding your fish is no different. It can lead to a bunch of health troubles. There is sometimes when overfeeding your fish is excusable, I guess. So when you're conditioning your fish to breed them, for that first week before you actually try and breed your fish, sometimes you do want to overfeed them a bit just to condition them up, get the males ready to breed and get the females nice and full of eggs. But every other time, you shouldn't really be overfeeding your fish at all. So like I always say, you want to feed your fish as much as they can eat in 2 to 3 minutes. And in that time, if there's any leftover food, then you don't want to just leave that in there. You want to take that out. As for how often you should be feeding your fish, it really does depend, what fish you have, what sort of tank you've got set up. If you are trying to breed them, a bunch of things. As for me, I've got a bunch of different size fish in my collection. I've got a bunch of different varieties as well. For my baby fish, so all my fry, like newly hatched fry and everything like that, I feed them every day, sometimes twice a day. And that's just because, you want to be keeping your fry nice and full. That is how they develop very quickly for you. So pretty much all these tanks behind me here, you can see this one's looking a little bit disgusting at the moment because I actually threw a little bit of zucchini in there yesterday and I forgot to take it out, which is something else you don't want to do. But yeah, all these tanks here get fed, once every 2 days. Sometimes if I'll have leftover brine shrimp or things like that, I'll put that in there for them to eat. So they get very small portions throughout the week. And then every now and then, maybe once a week, I'll throw in a little bit of zucchini or something for the bristlenose. And then sometimes, if I get new fish from wholesalers and they come in a little bit skinny, I'll feed those, obviously a lot more than once every 2 days. But yeah, for the most part, most of my fish get fed once every 2 days, and it's a pretty small portion. I really do not like overfeeding my fish at all. You run into so many health problems. So some of the health problems you can run into is things like fatty liver disease. So apparently this is super common in things like rainbow fish and African cichlids. I'm not sure why they're, the most common to get it, but apparently they are. And it's basically just when there's an excess amount of fat in the liver. So like the name suggests, I guess. And yeah, that comes around when you're just feeding your fish way too much or you're just feeding them a really bad diet. Some other things that can occur is, your fish can just get really massive. So they could be full of eggs or they can just fill up with food. And that can really affect their swimming. So sometimes it'll make them float, sometimes it'll make them sink. You really don't want that for your fish. You want them to be able to control their swimming really well. So if they are getting too fat and they are starting to swim a little bit funny, then you definitely know you're overfeeding your fish, and that can really shorten the life of your fish. So yeah, as for reason number one why you definitely shouldn't be overfeeding your fish, it's because, it'll lead to a whole bunch of health problems for your fish. It just makes your fish, not have a great quality of life. It also can shorten their life quite a lot. So trying to steer clear from overfeeding is definitely better for your fish's health in general. Moving on to the next reason why you don't want to be overfeeding your fish, it's because it can diminish your water quality rapidly. So like I showed you before, this is just from one piece of zucchini and it's just been sitting in there, and overnight it's just fouled up the water a lot. Like the water's turned green almost, which is definitely not ideal for this aquarium, but I will definitely, change it out right after this video. I only just noticed it now looking in the little screen here. But yeah, usually when you overfeed your fish, they're not going to eat all the food. So there's going to be food that sinks down and is just left to sit there in your aquarium. And that'll slowly decay, and that can cause a whole bunch of problems for your water. It can just cloud up your water like this, which is pretty disgusting, but it can also lead to things like ammonia spikes. So ammonia is very toxic for your fish if it builds up in large quantities, and that can cause a whole bunch of problems with your fish's gills. Obviously, you can try and avoid this by having plenty of plants in your aquarium. If you have no plants in your aquarium, you've got a much higher risk of ammonia spikes occurring. But if you've got a few aquarium plants just like these aquariums, then ammonia shouldn't really worry you at all unless you are just severely overfeeding your fish. So like I mentioned before, you want to feed your fish as much as they can eat in 2 to 3 minutes, and then you want to suck out any leftover food that's, left at the bottom, particularly if you don't have any scavenger fish or bottom dwelling fish that will go around and eat that food. So something you can also do to try and minimize this is feeding them 2 small portions throughout the day. So instead of feeding them, 1 big portion in the morning, you can try and do like half a portion in the morning and half a portion in the afternoon. And you want those to be obviously smaller than your full-size portion, just because they're half. And yeah, that should help minimize the risk of you overfeeding. It does give your fish a little bit of a break throughout the day so they can get hungry again. So yeah, with that being said, as for another reason you definitely don't want to overfeed your fish, it's because it can lead to poor water quality. Moving on to the next reason on our list, this one sort of goes hand in hand with the poor water quality, and that's an increased risk of disease. So yeah, like I said, this one is pretty much directly linked to the last point. And that's because when you are overfeeding your fish and your water quality is fouling up, that can lead to your fish becoming a lot weaker. And when your fish are a lot weaker, it means their immune system is a lot weaker. So because of that, they've got a heightened risk of getting diseases like dropsy or fin rot. So dropsy is pretty much a death sentence for your fish. I mean, you definitely can save your fish from dropsy, but it is pretty hard, particularly if you don't catch it early and you only just notice when they're starting to really show bad symptoms. So basically what happens is your fish fills up with fluid and their scales sort of come off their body a little bit. I'll try and pop up a picture, but it looks really like gross. And the reason they do that is to try and let, fluid out. I think it can also happen from gas buildup. I'm not too sure really. And yeah, that mainly comes around when you got poor water quality and your fish's immune system isn't working as it should be. And then fin rot is obviously when your fish's fins rot. So this happens a lot of the time on longfin fish with lots of fin. So things like bedders, swordtails, longfin varieties of fish, they're all super susceptible to fin rot, and fin rot's a lot easier to cure than the dropsy. It's just, you don't want your fish going through that. So it's very important that you are making sure you're not overfeeding. That way your water quality doesn't diminish and your fish are a lot more safe from getting any sorts of terrible diseases. So yeah, with that said, as for another reason you don't want to be overfeeding your fish, it's because it can lead to a higher risk of your fish getting a disease. Moving on to the final reason on our list, this one's definitely nowhere near as bad as the last 3, but it's that it can cause algae overgrowth in your aquarium. So when the fish food breaks down, it obviously produces ammonia, which turns into nitrites, the nitrates, and those nitrates are exactly what the algae wants to be able to grow. So all these nutrients that the decaying fish food add into the water really does help the algae establish and bloom in your aquarium. Now again, you've got a lot lower of a risk of this occurring if you do have lots of plants in your aquarium, just because those plants use the nutrients before the algae can. But if you don't have any plants in your aquarium, then algae will most likely take over, and you'll just have poor water quality, your fish will be getting sick, and you'll just have algae everywhere, so it really won't be too good whatsoever. So there's 2 main reasons algae grows, and that's if there's excess light or excess nutrients. So if you are having problems with your algae, you can sort of just look at those 2 things, see if you've got too much light. If you don't, then you've probably got too many nutrients, and that probably means that you're either over fertilizing or you're overfeeding your fish. So yeah, with that said, the final reason you don't want to be overfeeding your fish is because it can lead to a high risk of algae outbreaking in your aquarium. So that is actually going to bring us to the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope this video helps a few of you guys out. If you did enjoy today's video and you haven't done so already, please make sure to go down and subscribe. And while you're down there, smash the like button and comment your thoughts on today's video. I always love going down there and reading them all, and I try to reply back to as many comments as I can. Also, if you haven't done so already, make sure to go check out my website, aussiefishkeeping.com. I've got all sorts of fish, shrimp, other aquarium products up there. But yeah, with that said, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all so much for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you all in that next video.